Poor families from the bottom rung should leave. The meat will taste bad. At a fancy steakhouse, when my daughter Jessica ordered cheaper meat, a banker at the next table started to pick on her. Her name is Julie Robinson, and we've had run-ins with her before. At the height of my anger, I decided to make a significant decision. My name is Michelle Stevens. I'm turning 50 this year and am a part-time working housewife. Due to being born to a father who loved collecting paintings, our family home was adorned with many artworks. I believe my dad often talked about paintings even during dinner, mentioning things like, "The use of color in that painting is exceptional," or "The artist who drew that was struggling in life back then, and it reflects in the art." Given the environment I grew up in, it wouldn't have been surprising if I had become an artist, but sadly, I had no talent in drawing. In my report cards, I always scored a C in art, and even now, I don't get the appeal of abstract paintings. However, my dad never discouraged me and told me to do what you love, so I studied economics in college. I met my current husband in college, and we got married when I was 25. A year after our marriage, Jessica was born. This life event led me to quit my job back then and fully focus on raising her. Once Jessica started elementary school and didn't need constant care, I started my part-time job. While my husband had a good income, I wanted to set an example for her by working as well. Fortunately, Jessica grew up well and is now a 24-year-old hardworking professional. She seems to face various challenges at work, but is leading a lively life. Jessica loves steak, and about once a month, she, my husband, and I visit a fancy steakhouse. I also love meat, so I always look forward to our steak outings. When I lost both my parents around 2 years ago, going out for steak somewhat lightened my sorrow. Today as well, I've made lunch plans with Jessica to go to a fancy steakhouse. It's a weekday afternoon, but Jessica happened to have the day off, and I didn't have work either. My husband couldn't join us because he's on an extended business trip. But that's all right. Once he's back, we'll plan another outing with the three of us. As lunchtime approached, Jessica and I headed to our favorite steakhouse, and immediately started browsing the menu upon being seated. This restaurant is top tier, so the beef is, of course, delicious. However, their pork and chicken are equally tasty. The pork and chicken are also cheaper compared to beef, so we end up ordering them often. This time too, Jessica said, "I'll have the pork ribs and the juicy chicken, please." Of course, we didn't just order that, we also got some beef and rice. Soon after our orders started arriving, and Jessica and I eagerly began grilling. As we relished the meal, we finished the meat in no time. We thought of ordering some more. But then, from the table across the aisle, we heard a weird chuckling sound. Wondering what was going on, we turned to see a middle-aged, somewhat chubby woman giggling at us. "Excuse me, is there a problem?" I asked, only to have the woman laugh even more. "Well, it's just funny. You come to such a fancy steak place and order cheap pork and chicken." She had been observing what we were eating. It felt invasive and uncomfortable. What we chose to eat is our business. We happen to like pork and chicken. Though I found her very rude, I tried to ignore her and focused back on the menu. But the woman from the next table wouldn't stop bothering us. "Pork and chicken, isn't that just bland? When there's delicious beef available, I can't understand why anyone would be so obsessed with pork and chicken." Your meat is burning." I pointed to the lady's table. "Huh? Oh no, it really is." Jessica quickly grabbed the tongs. On the grill, an expensive-looking piece of meat was charred black. Julie was making a face, probably thinking it was because she was bothering us. I totally believe this was Julie's fault, but after moving the meat to her plate, she glared at us sharply. "It's because of you too! The best meat in this place is ruined. This was the most expensive one. What are you gonna do about it?" "What can we do?" I thought. "How about ordering a new piece?" I suggested hesitantly, but that only made Julie angrier. "It was your fault that the meat got ruined. Why should I have to pay out of pocket and order again?" Julie's anger seemed to be escalating, and she finally said, "Get out of this restaurant." "Hey, this is a high-end steakhouse, right? The only thing to order here is the prime beef. Doesn't matter if they have pork or chicken on the menu. The right choice is beef. People nibbling on pork and chicken like they're poor should probably just leave. At her absurd reasoning, both Jessica and I were dumbfounded. Seeing our reactions, Julie continued to rant. Only people like me, who can afford to dine here twice a week, should be using this place. After all, I work at Blue Bank. I'm an elite. Blue Bank? Blue Bank, a major bank, is where I have an account. But something else caught my attention. I felt like I had seen Julie at Blue Bank before. Poor people like you have no right to taste the meat of this restaurant. Come on, just leave. As I watched Julie continue to rant, I finally remembered where I had seen her. Didn't you have a disagreement with me at a Blue Bank ATM recently? She seemed to recognize me as well and pointed, saying, "Ah, that annoying woman." The story dates back about a month ago. I stopped by Blue Bank to withdraw some money from the ATM. For some reason, the ATM, which should have been functional, wasn't working. The screen was pitch black and it wasn't working. As I was wondering what the issue was, a bank employee with a name tag reading Julie approached. It was the same woman. "Hey, what did you do? Did you break the ATM?" Julie seemed to think I had broken the ATM and frowned at me. "No, I didn't break it. It wasn't working from the start. I think there might be some issue with it." I tried to explain, but Julie insisted that I had broken it. "Don't try to act like it wasn't your fault." Just then, the branch manager, Jim, arrived and asked what the problem was. When I explained the situation, Jim immediately apologized. "I'm sorry. That ATM is out of order. But it seems the notice sign fell off. It wasn't your fault, and we apologize for accusing you." "Julie, apologize!" Urged by Jim, Julie apologized, but she clearly looked displeased. Although her attitude was upsetting, I decided it wasn't worth making a fuss and left. I had almost forgotten about the incident with Julie, but here she was again. I briefly told Jessica about the previous incident, and she whispered, "I see." It was clear that, even if she didn't voice it, Jessica was taken aback by Julie's behavior. Seeing our reactions, Julie shouted, "Don't you dare look down on me, you poor people." By now, I could feel the stares of other customers. The staff was also looking over, unsure of how to intervene. "Please, keep your voice down. You're disturbing the other customers and the restaurant. Everyone's watching." I tried to warn her. Julie, realizing she was drawing attention, muttered, "Oh, I'm sorry," and started eating again. However, when the attention shifted away, she audaciously sat at our table. She whispered, "Leave, you bottom-class poor family. The meat will taste bad. Until you leave, I'm gonna keep complaining in a low voice." "What?" I was getting frustrated. Julie was incredibly persistent. She seemed intent on bad-mouthing us until we left. "Mom, let's just leave. I've had enough to eat." Jessica seemed to be annoyed and quickly stood up. She probably wasn't full yet, but her desire to distance herself from Julie must have prevailed. Realizing that Julie was not the kind of person to have a conversation with, I decided to give up on eating at this restaurant. "I get it. We'll go somewhere else." Upon hearing that, Julie grinned at me. "Oh, finally got the hint? Gosh, poor people sure are slow to catch on." Why do we have to leave because of someone like her? I wasn't gonna let this slide. I pulled out my phone, ready to retaliate. "I'm about to call Jim, the branch manager, and cancel a deposit of $3 billion. If you apologize right now, I might reconsider." Hearing this, Julie's face turned to shock for a moment, then she chuckled. "What's this about a $3 billion deposit? There's no way someone content with pork and chicken could have that kind of money. Come up with a better lie." Julie clearly didn't believe me. Her lack of customer awareness was glaringly evident, and I sighed. "All right, I'll call the branch manager. I'll step outside the restaurant to do so, but don't say I didn't warn you." I took Jessica with me, settled the bill, and went outside. As I was about to make the call, Julie came out too. "This seems fun. I'll watch from here. You're probably not gonna call the branch manager, but some random guy, right? A setup? I can't wait to see who answers." Annoyed by her taunting, I made the call. I dialed the number for Blue Bank and asked for Jim. Jim quickly came on the line, and when I explained the situation, he immediately apologized. "I'm so sorry. Julie has been incredibly rude. I'll make sure she doesn't bother you again, Ms. Michelle. We'll consider disciplinary actions against her. Please reconsider canceling the deposit?" "No, I can't trust a bank with employees like that. Being treated as poor just for eating pork and chicken is just too much. Plus, she treated me as a suspect regarding an ATM incident without any proof. If you let Julie continue, I feel it could lead to a major financial issue in the future. I'd like to cancel before that happens." Jim was again heard apologizing, but then Julie snatched my phone and blurted out something unthinkable. "Who are you? Claiming to be the branch manager? Are you this poor woman's husband?" She genuinely believed she wasn't speaking with Jim. Sadly for her, she was indeed speaking to the real branch manager, Jim. After such disrespectful remarks, this wouldn't end well. From the other end, I heard Jim's angry voice shout, "Is that Julie speaking? I am Jim, the branch manager." Julie finally realized who she was talking to, her face going pale. "Are you really the branch manager? I thought she was calling some random guy. I'm so sorry." Julie kept apologizing over and over again. However, it was too late to apologize no matter how she tried. From the phone, you could hear the loud voice of Jim, the branch manager, and Julie's face went pale as if she were ill. Jim's voice was hard to hear at times, but the words come and immediately came through. Yes. I'll pass the phone to Ms. Michelle now. I'm so sorry about that." She then handed me the smartphone, saying, "Here you go, it's your phone call," with a courteous gesture. "Thanks," I replied. I took the phone and spoke with Jim again. He wanted me to apologize properly, so we headed to Blue Bank. All the while, Julie looked distraught and couldn't focus. When we arrived, Jim greeted us. We were led to a meeting room, and Julie was told to apologize. Without resistance, Julie said, "I am deeply sorry." She then sat down on a nearby chair, holding her head in despair. "Man, I was enjoying some fancy steak, and I didn't expect this. I shouldn't have played hooky." "Wait, you were playing hooky?" I asked in surprise. Seeing my reaction, Julie looked taken aback. "Well, not exactly playing hooky, I was just a bit tired." She tried hard to make an excuse, but it was too late. Jim, with an awkward expression, explained, "It's quite embarrassing, but Julie called in sick today due to a high fever. However, we found out from a call earlier that she was at a fancy steakhouse. In other words, she lied about being sick." Come to think of it, it was a weekday afternoon. The bank was open for regular business hours. To use sickness as an excuse to eat fancy steak? After being rude to a client and skipping work? I really can't trust you anymore," I said in a sharp tone. Jim apologized again. And Julie kept apologizing, saying, "I'm so sorry." However, she then added, "But come on, a deposit of $3 billion? You can't blame me for being skeptical." Jim immediately pointed out, "Didn't I inform you about Ms. Michelle a long time ago? And yet, you didn't remember. This was your mistake, so stop complaining." "Yes, I'm very sorry." Julie's face showed regret as she apologized again. However, her demeanor didn't seem genuinely remorseful. It was evident she was merely apologizing because she was scolded. That half-hearted apology is enough. But a deposit of $300 million does seem unreal, doesn't it? Let me explain. Actually, my father had a passion for collecting paintings, but he passed away a few years ago. I kept his paintings as a keepsake for a while, but unfortunately, I couldn't appreciate their true value. I decided to sell them to someone who'd cherish them more, and when I did, my account ballooned to $300 million. Is that even possible? Julie was more shocked than convinced. I was equally surprised when I sold the paintings, wondering how they could fetch such a high price. I understood how she felt. I didn't want to give my father's treasured paintings to just anyone, so I had them professionally appraised and sold them for their rightful value. As a result, I ended up with an unbelievable sum. I sold the last painting about 3 months ago. I wondered about keeping such a massive amount idle, but between part-time jobs and house chores, I just left it in the blue bank. I've decided to close the account. I think my late father would advise against leaving so much money untouched. It's the money he left for me, so I don't want to keep it in an unreliable institution. Upon hearing this, Jessica nodded. I agree with my mom. Having someone like Julie involved with such a significant amount of money does naturally raise concerns. Hearing this, Jim looked resigned. Understood. We'll go ahead and cancel that for you. Later on, Julie will be dealt with strictly. Just when I thought everything was settled, Julie continued her pleas. Please wait a minute. What's gonna happen to me? Please don't punish me. You're not gonna fire me, are you? Stop causing a scene in front of the customer. Miss Michelle, I'm terribly sorry. Please don't mind Julie's behavior. Before I knew it, Jim stepped in, but Julie suddenly gripped my arm tightly. Please, I beg you. Convince the manager not to penalize me. If my pay gets cut or I get fired, I'll be in big trouble. Truth be told, I have debts. A bank worker with debts? And yet you're eating at fancy steakhouses? Maybe start with some budgeting? When I said this with a stern tone, Julie's face looked like she was about to cry. Don't be so cold. Once I started living luxuriously, I couldn't stop. Hey, why not share some of your $300 million with me? Just $100,000 would do. What an absurd request. Why should I give you any money? I don't want to give you even a penny. When I pushed back, Julie's face turned beet red and she snapped. Stingy rich folks, aren't you? Do you guys even work? Having $300 million and still working? How much do you love money? Rich folks like you taking away jobs from others is simply low class. Our employers consider Jessica and I as formal employees. You have no right to tell us to quit. I got my work ethic from my parents' upbringing. Because we were wealthy enough to collect high-end paintings, we were well off back home. However, my parents, fearing I would develop a skewed sense of money, always tried to maintain an ordinary lifestyle. My dad worked diligently, and my mom put her all into house chores and her part-time job. If my parents had been lazy just because they were rich, I might have never thought of working earnestly and might have ended up unemployed. Now, as an adult with a child, I've taken after my parents, and I've raised Jessica with the same values. I took on part-time jobs because I wanted Jessica to see a hard-working woman as a role model. Perhaps that's why Jessica never became lazy and grew up to be a responsible adult in society. Also, working helps you learn common sense in society, and it adds structure to your life. That's why, even if we have money, we believe in working. I don't want unsensible folks like you meddling in our affairs. When I firmly spoke my piece, Julie was at a loss for words. Jim also said with a stern face, I get it, you're not remorseful. I'm gonna discuss firing you with the higher-ups, so brace yourself. Upon hearing this, Julie snapped back to reality. I'm so sorry, Ms. Michelle. I've been so stressed out lately and ended up complaining without thinking. I don't need a penny, just please forgive me. Obviously, after this series of events, I didn't feel like forgiving her. We don't need your insincere apologies. Face the consequences and suffer for it. I won't forgive you either. It's absurd that after saying such horrible things, you don't genuinely feel remorse. Following my lead, when Jessica spoke, it seemed Julie finally grasped that she wasn't getting any sympathy. She slumped dejectedly, muttering apologies over and over, but nobody comforted her. Later, I heard from Jim that Julie was fired. She was already known for being frequently late and was often rude to her juniors, so she had multiple issues with her work ethic. With this incident on top, she was swiftly fired. I heard that the moment Julie was informed of her termination, she collapsed on the spot. Reluctantly, an ambulance was called, and at the hospital, they discovered she had diabetes. Seems she didn't consider her age and indulged in meats and sweets daily, which has now put her in a critical condition. Currently, I heard Julie is hospitalized, and the medical bills are piling up. Losing a job while in debt, and on top of that having health issues, her future's probably gonna be pretty tough. The way things turned out for her feels like a harsher punishment than I expected, so my resentment towards her has faded. Jessica seemed to feel the same way, saying, if she's suffering that much, let's let bygones be bygones. On my end, I decided to manage the 3 billion yen I had in Blue Bank, which I guess would be something like $30 million here. After discussing it with my husband, who just returned from a long business trip, and Jessica, we decided to keep only what we'd need for the future and donate the rest. I didn't want any unnecessary attention, so I donated anonymously. This way, we didn't get any weird looks from the public. The money we kept? We didn't leave it in Blue Bank, we put it in a different one. Our family tradition of going out for steak is still going strong. In fact, we all went out just yesterday. My husband was with us this time. We ordered not just beef but also pork and chicken. No one gave us any side glances, and we thoroughly enjoyed our meal. Both Jessica and my husband seemed pleased, and I personally had a blast enjoying the meat. I want to keep making these happy moments with my family. Of course, we're gonna keep an eye on our health too.